in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is Amy Fairweather at Swords to Plowshares, and today we're going to be doing a webinar on employment outreach for both the California and the Texas veteran employment grantees. It's really exciting, I think, to have all of us from both states together, and I really look forward also to seeing you next month. We have a lot in common in terms of high numbers of veterans in our states and some of the same challenges providing employment services and wraparound services for those veterans. So this is all very exciting. I'm going to introduce you to two of our staff members. For those of you who are returning grantees, these are new staff, and they will be presenting today's webinar. I also want to tell you all, as far as asking questions, you can type in questions at any time throughout the webinar, and at the end I'll be reading them off for Shannon and Victor. You can also, if you have any technical difficulties, please write that in there and we'll try and help you out with that as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters. Shannon Kissinger is a policy associate here at Swords to Plowshares. He's a master's in social work from Humboldt State University and a BA in journalism with emphasis on foreign policy. Shannon has extensive experience in veteran policy, concentrating on macro solutions to veterans' issues. He also presents our Combat to Community Cultural Competency curriculum to employers, police, and other professionals, mental health professionals, and provides outreach and technical assistance to other community-based veteran services agencies. Shannon worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs as a social worker, dealing specifically with much of our cohorts and homeless veterans. He then moved on to infectious disease and medical practice. He's worked for numerous veteran nonprofits throughout California and obviously the VA, and also managed geriatric and senior services for clients. Shannon spent 5 years in the U.S. Navy as a Seavey and as a service-connected disabled veteran. Our other presenter is Victor Nzinza, also a policy associate here at Swords to Plowshares. He also presents our Combat to Community Cultural Competence curriculum and provides outreach and technical assistance. Victor is concentrating largely on universities and schools here and how we can help students be successful in their education and ultimately in their career aspirations. Victor graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's degree in English from the University of the Pacific and earned his MFA in writing from the University of San Francisco. Victor spent 4 years in the U.S. Marine Corps. He is an OIF veteran who served 2 tours of duty in 2003 and 2004 and has been very active in the veteran community since 2008, again focusing on access to education to California veterans, and served as the president for Student Veterans of America chapter at the University of Pacific. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon, who will begin, and again feel free to ask questions at any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. So I am Shannon Kissinger, as she described, and let's get this show on the road. So this is what we're going to go through today: establishing community partnerships, identifying outreach, knowing the continuum of care, materials, and digital outreach. I'll be doing the first 3 sections, and my esteemed colleague Victor will be covering the rest of the PowerPoint, or the rest of the presentation. So, identifying who you're intending to serve. With this, we have different populations that we want to get the outreach and services to, which in turn means that you're going to use different outreach methodologies and have different types of needs for each individual population. As you can see here, we have multiple different types of veterans that we're going to do outreach to. Remember that customer service is the most important part of your outreach and the services that you provide. It's all about attitude. You want to make sure you use respect, honesty, and forthrightness, but you also want to recognize where the client is coming from and what they want. So when you have your particular space, you want to have friendly staff, as this fine gentleman is smiling at the camera here. But also, too, if you're going to put flags up, don't use one particular flag for one particular branch, because you want to be all-inclusive as an agency. So we suggest putting up all the different branch flags. You want to have a safe space for the clients to be in, and it wants to be a welcoming space. So our first poll question: where do you currently conduct outreach?
So the poll question, you can go ahead and you can answer all that apply: VA or vet centers, colleges and or universities, street outreach, online or social media, events, and others. So go ahead and choose again all that apply, and we'll keep the poll open for just a moment to let you all have an opportunity to do that. Okay. We're having some changes in the screen here. If you just bear with us for a moment. I think we realized that part of the screen was being cut off, and so we're trying to address that. Shannon? Are we back on?
Hello, I apologize. We're having some technical difficulty, and we'll get back to that as soon as possible. As we can see, though, it looks like the polls are the majority with the VA, which is a great agency to work for, or not work for, but work with when doing outreach. One thing that I would like to make a comment about, though, is that with the VA, you're only going to reach a specific population of veterans, and those veterans are veterans with general discharges and honorable discharges. Unfortunately, those veterans that are not eligible for VA services, those with other than honorables, bad conducts, or dishonorables, you won't be able to reach them through the VA. Other ways that you can reach those veterans would be street outreach, other community providers. Those veterans also go to schools. You can reach them at universities, community colleges, and the like. And also with community events, such as, sporting events out on the street. When I was with the Department of Veterans Affairs, I would do street outreach with the HOT team, the San Francisco Homeless Outreach Team. And when I also lived in Humboldt County while I was going to graduate school and worked with the vet center up there, we did a lot of work with the street outreach services. And so with that, we would get out onto the street and help and find veterans to get into our services. So it looks like we are coming back on. Thank you. So if we'll hold on a second. Okay, thank you. So the street outreach. This was a big part of what I did with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Like I said before, it was with the San Francisco HOT team, the Humboldt County Street Outreach Services, and also doing pick counts. One thing that you want to realize, though, with street outreach is that this population generally is lower functioning. So depending on what the services you provide, you want to make sure that you're reaching the right people at the right time. So like I said, street outreach, generally homeless population, generally low functioning, and they have a multitude of concerns like dual diagnosis, co-occurring disorders, generally homeless. So it's hard to have an individual be successful in their life if they don't have a home to go to. So just be mindful of where you find your clients. Another great way, you want to think outside the box. So many veterans are plugged in through outreach events or welcome home events, social events, yellow ribbon, stand downs, happy hours, and other networking events. One place that worked for me when I worked for Swords to Plowshares before was that we would do veteran-sponsored events. So I remember when I worked for Swords in 2007, 2009, the VA, the Palo Alto VA, had a huge welcome home event on Moffett Field in the South Bay of South Bay of San Francisco, pardon me. And we would table at events there. So we would have the whole outreach team from our agency go down. So there's one person from each department. We would have our outreach material and we would interact with clients as they came up to the table looking for information. Those are great to get your name out. They're not that great, though, to enroll clients into your services. Another place to find veterans is at sporting events, concerts. That, again, is a great way to get your name out. It's not a great way to enroll a client on the spot. You can get them to come in to your agency afterwards once they find out who you are and what you know. Another place that's outside the box is union halls. A lot of veterans do go into the trades, plumbers, carpenters, masons. So those union halls that represent those different trades is also a great avenue to deliver information and leave outreach material. One thing that worked for me in the past when I would do this is that I would always carry business cards with me, my own personal business card for whatever agency I worked at. And when I went to restaurants or bars or bookstores or libraries, anywhere that had a cork board, I would take a business card and I'd leave it on there. And surprisingly, we actually got a lot of clients to come in. They would contact me and I would just direct them in the appropriate department. So higher education institutions, your colleges, your community colleges, your universities. These are great avenues to deliver an outreach, to deliver outreach material and to meet new clients. One thing I like to point out, though, is that the second bullet point down, GI Bill accrediting agent, is also called the VA certifying official at particular universities. This person deals with all those veterans who are receiving some type of educational benefit, not just the GI Bill or post 9/11 GI Bill. So that's good to know who that person is, because that's a really good first step for that particular school. Not just, another place to look as well is not just disability office or LGBTQ office, but other specialized clubs, so sports clubs, health-related clubs, interest-related clubs. So, you know, let's say there's a crew team. Let's say that there's a student nurses team. That sort of thing is another avenue to look at and to outreach to. I'd like to point out here, so more than 44,000 veterans using educational benefits are at the California Community College level. One thing I'd like to point out is that just in San Francisco, at San Francisco City College alone, which is a community college, there are 2,000 veterans that are enrolled and actively receiving benefits at that school. Now, if you look at another, the second sort of tier with the California school, higher education school system, we have the CSUs, the California State Universities. At Humboldt State alone, in 2015, 1 in 20 students were veterans, and those veterans are counted because they're receiving benefits. One thing that is really good to know is that just because there are students there who are receiving benefits who are veterans. There's also students there who are veterans but not receiving benefits. So there's also another cohort to look at. And with that cohort, a way to reach that cohort is through those specialized clubs, the student veterans clubs, that sort of thing. So outreach, tracking, and reporting. Here I'd like to point out, this is essentially a psychosocial. I'm going to use a lot of social work terms because that's the trade that I had, but this is essentially a psychosocial. One thing I'd really like to point out is that you want to find out how your client heard about your agency. So when you know that information, you can tailor your outreach to those particular areas. Say the client found out about your agency and came into your agency because you left some outreach material at a student veteran organization. Well, with that information, you can use to start hitting more student veteran organizations. Let's say your client found out about it from a court board. Well, that'll give you the information to go out and post more information, more outreach material on those court boards. That information helps you tailor your outreach so you're just not throwing paperwork into the wind and hoping someone will find your agency. Know your continuum of care. This is a very important thing, especially in social services. You never want to do a cold handoff. Now, a cold handoff is essentially where you drop your client off at the next step of the process. So with SWORDS, we have HSS, Health and Social Services, the Frontline Drop-In Clinic, and we have employment, training, and transitional housing. Let's say we have a client who comes in the front door for the Frontline Drop-In Clinic. He starts with a case manager, and then they start working the process to get him into transitional housing. Well, that case manager in HSS is not going to just dump that client with a case manager in transitional housing. What will happen is they'll do a warm handoff. And a warm handoff, 3 real easy ways to do that is first introduce the client to the new case manager. Before you transfer the client to the new case manager, talk with the new case manager about the different issues, concerns, goals, and directions of that client. And the third is you walk that client to the new case manager, and then you hand off, which is a warm handoff. Standardized intake. I'm going to be honest with you. When I go to the VA and I have my appointments, I don't like to answer the same questions over and over and over again. At a certain point, those standardized questions should already be understood. Now, some of those standardized questions, date of birth, social security number, branch that I served in, discharge type, my name, and the particular goals that I want. Everyone is individualized, and everyone has their own particular needs that they need, everyone has their own particular needs. But those standardized questions are already known. So don't make that client answer those questions, the same questions over and over and over again, because it leads to disinterest on the client's part. These are 2 big areas where, as we saw in the poll question, a lot of agencies do outreach with and to. On the left is the Department of Veterans Affairs logo, and on the right is the Vet Center. Now, they're both part of the same overarching agency, Department of Veterans Affairs, but they are very distinct. One thing to take into account is that the Vet Center deals specifically with combat veterans, veterans that suffered MST, and those family members of veterans who either suffered MST or combat veterans or both. So they're the same, but they're also different. VSOs and county VSOs. So your VSOs are essentially agencies such as the American Legion, AMVETS, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Special Forces Foundation, CV Foundation, Disabled American Veterans, and also our agency, Swords to Plowshares. Now, your county VSOs are different. Your county VSOs are operated and owned by whatever county is within that state. So, and they both do different things, but they're both great ways to network for referrals for veterans. Now, one thing that you need to realize is that post 9/11 veterans aren't going to those VSOs as pre 9/11 veterans have been. So realize that when you go to the VSOs, generally speaking, you're going to be getting a client base that's older, but it's still a viable option for younger veterans. So this is Swords to Plowshares. As you can see, we have these different agencies and departments. Well, all the departments talk to each other. And that would, going back to that earlier slide, that's where we talk about the warm handoffs as opposed to closed or cold handoffs. So someone that's in housing wants to get a job or wants to get legal services. So what will happen is, like I mentioned before, the two case managers will talk to each other. There'll be an introduction, and then they'll hand the client over. And this is these wraparound services as a previous slide. These are all the different parts of our agency and multiple agencies, because not every agency just does one specific thing. I'd like to point out too, there's an idea here. It's called equifinality. Now, what equifinality means is different paths to the same place. So each area in these wraparound services is an open door for that client to get services for all the services provided by the agency. So just keep that in mind, that you shouldn't stop someone if they were coming into your agency for employment when they also need legal support or educational support or transportation support. Every door is an open door to the rest of the agency. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to my esteemed colleague, Victor Nzunza. You have a good day.
So, thank you, Shannon, for that. Great information. I think that it'll be useful to all of you. As he said, my name is Victor Nzunza, Policy Associate here with Institute for Veteran Policy. So, part of what we're going to cover today is materials. So, it's very important to make sure that your materials reflect the organization and that it also reflects the services that you're going to provide. If you look to the left, you'll see a materials handout that Swords uses, and it provides a couple of items, but not too much information to overwhelm the client. And then to the right, you'll see one of our outreach kits, and this is important too. If you take a look in there, you'll see that all of our outreach materials are organized. They have card holders as well. And so this is important because you never know when you're going to have an opportunity for outreach. So you want to have this packed and ready to go. That way you can get out in the streets and do your outreach. So this next slide is going to cover material suggestions. So you have to be very clear with what you're saying and what your program does, who's going to be eligible for your programs, and what they need to do to apply, and also who they need to ask if they need more information. Also, you want to use person-first language when possible, and essentially what that means is you want to say something like veteran with a disability instead of disabled veteran. This puts the person first, and this shows a greater deal of respect for the person who's coming to see you for services. Okay, so some practical things about materials. You definitely want to use high-resolution graphics and photos, and you want to try to avoid stock photos. The reason for this is you don't want to be distributing a flyer that poorly represents your organization. If you have bad graphics or stock photos, those can be problematic, and there are various reasons for that. First of all, you want the images to be clear, so that way people can see them on the flyers and other things that you're distributing. And also, the reason you want to avoid stock photos is because you can understand that many organizations might use the same stock photos, and that can be a little redundant. And you want to create your own photos, a library that you have that actually shows people the personal side of your organization. Consider using some of your staff members, veterans that you're serving. It just gives a nice personal touch and also creates fresh and original content. This last point is more on the social media side of things, which we'll get into next. Formatting graphics and photos for each platform is really important. So if you're using Instagram or using Twitter or Facebook, across those platforms you're going to have different formats for graphics and photos. So you want to check and make sure that you're doing the best formatting so that you can optimize those photos for your audience. We'll also provide a handout and some information for you to understand how to format those graphics for each social media platform. So next, these are some more points on materials. Of course, as I said before, you want to aim for clarity and simplicity when you're making your materials. So one of the tendencies that people have is to try to use all of the space available on a page. So if you're handing out a small card for your clients to kind of get an idea of what exactly your organization does, you don't want to overwhelm them with information. So when you have text on the materials, you want to make sure that it's short and concise and gets to the point. Flags and patriotic imagery can be inviting but must represent all who have been in the military. So I think this is something that Shannon covered earlier, but also on materials you want to consider that as well. For some folks, patriotic imagery might be inviting, but for other folks, it might not be as inviting as you would think. So you want to limit it a little bit, and you also want to think about being tasteful when you do this. Also, when you're writing on your materials, things like woman or man, you want to make sure that you use those terms instead of female or male. Language has a lot to do with how people will associate with you and your organization, and also you want to make sure that you're using language that is respectful of all people involved in your organization. Also, the last point is really important. You always want to consider that anyone could have been in the military and avoid perpetuating stereotypes. Part of what you're trying to do as an organization is to really get people to better understand who veterans are, where they come from, and also highlight the diversity that they bring to the community. So anyone can really be a veteran. You really never know. So just assume that anyone can be a veteran first, and then when they tell you, encourage them to provide or to try to use your services, and let them know that it's an environment that's welcoming to all people from different branches of service. So with that, we have another poll question, and this question is, what digital platforms do you use for online outreach?
And you have some choices here, the usual, website, blog, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, other. But when I say the usual, this is always changing. And we have our social media folks here at Swords. Kevin Miller does a lot of this work. And it changes all the time, and it's important to stay on top of it and have someone who can run these things. And the other thing that's really helpful for us in terms of your answering these questions or asking questions is we can put together specific material for these platforms. So just as in our handouts, we have the Ultimate Guide to Social Media Image Sizes. We could send you best practices for Twitter. You know, for me, where once I get on something, it's already passé. I know I need some help with this stuff, so please let us know, and then we can get information to you that's specific and really goes into detail on how to do these things. Okay, so do we have the results? Okay. Facebook, everybody, that's not surprising. Website, of course. It's pretty much as I would answer these. So I think if we help you with more stuff about the website and blogs, certainly Twitter, and then these newer, the Instagram and the others, we will get you information about those. So let's carry on. Victor? Are we having technical difficulties?
No technical difficulties here. So let's get back to this. So I noticed that a lot of you responded with Facebook, of course, and the second one that you responded most to was website blog. I also noticed that LinkedIn was definitely a strong one as well, which makes sense since you guys are working with veteran employment. So with that note, I wanted to talk a little bit about LinkedIn especially, since that's a focus that you guys are going to be considering. So there's a great group on LinkedIn that's called the Veteran Mentor Network, and they have over 100,000 members there. And veterans will go here for a variety of reasons. A lot of them will go there to get advice on their resumes. A lot of them are networking for entrepreneurial reasons. Employers actually will go on and ask veterans questions and answer like questions about recruiting, like, well, how do I get a job at your company and things like this. So there's a lot of great opportunities to network with other veterans, to post jobs, to look for jobs, and all of these kinds of things. So it's a really great resource, and I suggest having your organizations check it out. So as the slide states, we don't really have exact statistics on social media usage by veterans. That's not really something to discourage you from using social media, however. If you consider some different cohorts, the older veterans are likely to not be using a lot of these social media programs, but that doesn't mean that they don't use them at all. Also, if you consider like post 9/11 vets, it's really important to push things out on these digital platforms, because most of the vets that are coming out of that era are actually really involved in Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, all of these channels. So you definitely want to encourage people who are handling your social media platforms to really push hard on these. Okay, so post 9/11 veterans especially, just like I said, digital outreach is a must. Higher education institutions, to include universities, community college, and vocational and trade schools. Now, I want to talk about a different approach here. So we already saw in the materials outreach that you would go out and make partnerships with higher education institutions and try to get flyers out there and outreach at events. One great way to do this on social media is to find your community college and university web pages. Almost all of these colleges have some kind of vets group that will have like a Facebook page or a Twitter handle or something like that. And so if you can find those, you can join their page and post some content for them to look at, or you can start trying to find a way to establish partnerships that way. You know, maybe you contact the president of a student veterans organization and say, well, hey, you know, I'm part of this organization. These are the services we provide. We'd like to work with you guys. And so developing those partnerships, even if it's on social media initially, it can also lead to a real-life partnership on campuses. So that's an important point that I want you guys to consider. Social media, even though it's digital, you know, there are real live people on the other end of this. And so it's a way to network and establish partnerships. But it's only good if you follow through and actually meet these people in person and get them into your organization's office. Also, we have the last point here, transition and care management team. These folks actually do a lot of great work. One of the things that they provide is they kind of give veterans who are transitioning a walkthrough of VA services. They provide them with referrals so that way they can get their needs met as far as benefits or any of those kind of things. They can check on claims for them. It's really remarkable what kind of stuff they can do for you. And so you definitely want to outreach with these folks because they're going to be like a point of contact for you with the veteran community. And so it's really important, especially for the referral side, because if they know about your organization and vets are like looking for your services in particular, like employment and things like that, they will definitely be able to point clients your way. So email. email is incredibly important as part of your organization's approach to getting new clients, establishing partnerships, and promoting events and other news items that you may have, especially new content and things like that for the web, like blog posts. So, as you can see, we're suggesting you use an e-newsletter. If it's something that you haven't done before, you want to try to use MailChimp. It's a really great way to get your message out about your organization. And it doesn't have to be incredibly complicated. MailChimp actually makes it really easy for you. So I'd suggest if you guys want to get started with this, think about doing a monthly newsletter and including some of your blog posts that you're putting out there, and also, talk about events in your newsletter and things that have happened in recent news that are related to your organization. So it looks like we're at the question portion of this. I'm going to hand this back over to Amy, and she's going to field some questions if you guys have any.
Okay, so if you have questions, go ahead and type them into the question box. These can be questions about anything, the presentation, our gathering next month, anything you have. Shannon, earlier you used an acronym which was a PIT count, and while I'm sure some of the people know what that is, can you describe a little bit more of what that is?
Yes. Sorry for using the acronyms. I'm so used to it being a service member myself that those acronyms just roll off the tongue without me even thinking about it. A PIT count is a point-in-time count, and what happens is with that is that, at least in San Francisco, the city will go out and just count homeless individuals within city limits for a particular point in time, henceforth the point-in-time count. Using that for outreach purposes really depends on what type of agency you are. So with SWORDS, we do provide services to homeless individuals, so a point-in-time count helps us dictate where we do outreach. So if there's a particular district or area of San Francisco where there's a lot of homeless individuals, primarily homeless veterans, it tells us that maybe we should start putting more effort to do outreach in that particular district. And that's pretty much how to use a point-in-time count.
Okay, great. I think also some of the outreach, at least it's been done in San Francisco with regard to the Homes for Heroes and the real push to end homelessness, is the city and agencies have really come together to create a vulnerability index. So this is about getting people into housing, and certainly some of these veterans are not going to be appropriate as employment clients, although in really going out and looking at the people who are actively homeless, the most vulnerable, the highest acuity, we get into housing. People who are less impacted by their homelessness or their mental health need can go through transitional supportive housing, SSVF, these things where we can get people on their feet and then get them into an employment path. There is a question about whether the transcript will be available. We will have you can stream. It'll take about a week, I think, to get it up, but you can listen to this later, or you can have other people on your staff listen to this, and we'll let you know where to find that on our YouTube page.
Amy, I'd like to make one more comment about the point-in-time count and doing outreach with them. It's not just about doing outreach to get new client bases. It's also outreach to make contacts and networking with other agencies, because in San Francisco, when we do the point-in-time count, it's not just random individuals who volunteer. Oftentimes, it's different social service agencies within the city who go out. So it's a great way to network, to see who else is out there for you to increase your client base through referrals with different agencies.
Okay, great. I have another question that's actually about a specific individual at one of our agencies uh, who hasn't heard about her travel arrangements. We will reach out and do that, but if anybody else has any questions about travel arrangements, send an email to me, afairweather@stp-sf.org, or to Mary, M. Moran, M-O-R-A-N, at stp, as in Swords to Plowshares, sf.org, and we'll make sure that we get that all straightened out.
Amy, can I,
Yep.
okay, I wanted to add a few things about your blogs. We talked a little bit about that, but one thing that I wanted to really drive home is that when you guys are creating new content, what you're really doing is driving visitors to your website, which is really important because not only are they going to come there for the content and to read your blogs, they're going to actually engage with your website at that point. They're going to look around and see what exactly you're all about, and that can help them to determine whether they need services from you or not. So some things that you might want to consider for blog posts, especially dealing with employment, consider doing some employer spotlights. So if you're dealing with a partnership with a employer in particular who's vet friendly and looking for vets actively, you want to spotlight them on your blog so that your clients can be aware of that and they can pursue those opportunities. Also, you want to talk about success stories. So if you have a particular client who was really successful in getting a job, this has a lot to do with promoting your organization, but also showing actual quantifiable outcomes to people. If there are success stories on your blog, people can relate to that and say, oh, well, this is what they're doing. They've gotten this veteran a job at this company, and that's actually really encouraging for people because they can see what you're doing, and that's how they get behind your message. Also, one of the things that's important about blogs is that you're really becoming thought leaders, and what that means is that people are going to come to you as experts on your particular subject, and they're going to ask you for your opinions and things like that. So when you're developing this knowledge base, it's really important to share that with others because it can be really useful for your partners and for veterans who are really receiving your services. Definitely you want to do this for events because if you can promote activities that you guys are doing and show who your partners are, who are donors involved, volunteers, supporters, things like that, it really kind of brings together the community around the issues that you're trying to address. Also, one last thing on the blogs is that consider this, most of the time when you're going to write a blog piece, it's going to be about 300 to 600 words. So that's an easy way to kind of get the word out there about things that you're doing without feeling overburdened about writing new content. A great way to do this is also to distribute this task to other members in your staff who have skills in writing. That way, not just one person is doing it. It also actually gives people a better picture of your organization when you have more people involved on the blog. So scheduling that can be great. And consistency really is a huge factor in how effective your website and blog is going to be. And with email also, I wanted to mention that there are ways to get your share buttons into the email and donation buttons, things like that. So if you look online, there's a lot of tutorials about how to add your Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and all of those accounts into your email signature. That way, if people want to go and check out your social media sites, they can definitely do that. Like I said, consistency is key, but also remain realistic about what's going to happen with your social media approach. Actually, it's kind of funny, but people talk about virality all the time, so viral videos and things like that, but the actual number is 0.0000001% of actual content goes viral. So don't expect going viral to really push your initiatives. What you really have to go for is consistency. in your content and making sure that your message is clear across all of those platforms.
Okay, we have a question from Josh Wafer that if we could talk a little bit more about out-of-the-box outreach and what does and does not work. Just one of the things that I'd say about that is that you know, we tend to sort of look for veterans where veterans are, and there are certainly underserved veterans who, you know, aren't going to where veterans are for whatever reason. They're not at the VFW, they're not at the Vets Club. They're everywhere, you know, because as we know, veterans are kind of like people. They're all different. So one of the, for women, for example, you could go to WIC offices, or that's the Women and Infant Children offices, community events, LGBT clubs.
Yes,
We've had a lot. Yeah,
I mean,
sorry.
that's okay. Veterans, as Amy said, veterans are everywhere. We make up, we're essentially a cross-section of society. So anyone from minority vets, African Americans, Latino, Asian Pacific Islanders, to different gender identities, LGBTQ, to male and female veterans. So that being said, you know, in San Francisco we have the Pride Parade. A great opportunity to do outreach if you meet veterans on the street or in a club there. School clubs, social clubs, not just American Legion VFW, but also there's a club in San Francisco, there's a few clubs in San Francisco that are sports specific. One of them is the Embarcadero Rowing Club. Now the Embarcadero Rowing Club, yes, they identify particularly as rowers, but there's also a fair number of veterans within that club. The Hash House Harriers is a running club in San Francisco that identifies primarily as runners, but there again, a lot of veterans are part of that club. So it's really just getting your name out. When I was in journalism school, I took some public relations courses, and in those courses they talked about sort of a sniper approach and a shotgun approach to your outreach. So your shotgun approach, it's almost like just throwing your paperwork into the wind and hoping someone will pick up your card or your outreach material. Whereas your sniper approach is you're pinpointing particular populations through particular agencies and events. So LGBTQ veterans, Pride events, other clubs that are related to that particular population. So you really want to you want to think about who you're trying to get. And once you find out who you're trying to get, then you can figure out where to get them. So homeless individuals, street outreach services, hot teams, shelters, social service agencies, younger veterans, you know, social media, events, some other events that you can go to are not just veteran-specific events, but you know, social events, music events, Outside Lands, Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. Meetup
Also,
is another way to.
Some of the groups that have come together that are, you know, that are driven by younger veterans, but like Team Red, White, and Blue, where they're getting together to do sports events, really, but the fact that they're together, they share information. And I just also wanted to interject that Congress Williams is sharing that the Military and Veteran Resource Centers have been found in Escondido and National City down in San Diego. And they're clearinghouses for co-located resources, and that they've been a super outreach source. And I think with some of the events and things that Shannon is talking about, you know, again, you're not necessarily going to actually enroll anybody at these events, but later on in the day or the week, they'll say, oh yes, I need to look for employment services, I should check these people out. And in these public places, they're not necessarily going to make themselves known, or the fact that they have service needs known, but you're getting your name out there. So I'm sorry, Shannon, go on.
Oh, I was just going to mention another great resource is meetup.com. Really all you do is find the search bar in meetup.com, type in veterans, and you're going to find quite a few veterans within your particular area that do have meetups. And that's just another great way. You contact the group, say, hey, listen, can I join, or can I come talk to you guys? And that's another way to do outreach. A lot of this stuff with outreach is, like Amy said, you're not going to really enroll the client when you meet them, wherever you meet them. You're going to enroll the client into your program once the client or the veteran comes back to you. Really, outreach is about getting your name out and networking and showing people that you're out there. You're an agency that is here to help veterans and that you do help veterans. So that's the biggest part of outreach, and that's really the prime driver of outreach.
Yeah, I think it's really about finding your people. I mean, that's how I look at it. I mean, as a veteran, when you're doing outreach, I just try to find my people, and usually I can tell who a veteran is at this point. It's easier to kind of identify a vet when you are a vet. But that doesn't mean people who aren't vets can't identify vets. But what I mean exactly is just trying to find your people is really about establishing authentic relationships with the people that you're serving.
One of the other, sort of out-of-the-box events, for example, that we do is every year we have an art show dedicated to women veterans, Shout Art by and for Women Veterans. It's a nice event. We also actually have it at, the last couple of years we've had it at Zendesk, which is one of the techie companies here, and they've hosted it in their very nice building on Market Street. And this is the kind of thing where it's, it's celebratory. It's a nice, hour or two for people after work before they go home to mix and mingle, and that's sort of, reaching out to an entirely different community, the arts community, and the sort of downtown after work cocktail hour community, who might, otherwise never run across veterans issues or think about it or know that their colleague at work is a veteran because they didn't say so because it never came up. So those are some of the, the really different events that can be fun to do and effective. Are there any more questions? Again, these we want to be responsive to you all, so if there are specific materials that you'd like to see about what Victor was saying earlier, having all of your social media coordinates available to your followers, specific advice about Twitter or other outreach opportunities, samples of materials, a sample blog. We're really happy to do that, and we want to be responsive to what you guys need and what would be really helpful for you. Also, with regard to our meeting next month, if there are specific materials or information that you'd like us to track down, we will do our very best to get whatever will be most helpful for all of you. So are there any other questions? Okay, all right. Well, I want to thank Victor and Shannon and thank all of you, and we really look forward to seeing you next month. And if you have any other questions in the meantime, feel free to call or email at any time.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.